All right. So the recording of our class did not convert. Um, so I'm not unable to upload it for you on Omnibox. This video is going to cover Act 4. It will try to cover as much as reasonably that I can. It's a shame that the class didn't record because it was a very good one. Those of you who were there, I think, really benefited very much from the questions that were asked, and so on. But we'll go through that. It's a very important act, all right, insofar as it really is the setup for Act 5. Okay, so just to remind you of a few things that are really important to get a grasp, we've been really focusing in on this transformation that's going on in Macbeth. Okay, so when we were looking at Act 3, we see that he's still thinking about things. He is still having some difficulty with decisions, but nothing like he had in the first couple of acts. He no longer needs Lady Macbeth to push him forward, right? He's even now acting outside of Lady Macbeth's influence, right? And she's not part of his plan to kill Banquo. He is planning and plotting at this point after the fact. And this is an important point because we saw this with Lady Macbeth as well in Act 3, where she was basically saying, okay, we did it. He's now king, but I'm not happy. There's no satisfaction here. Obviously indicating that the whole idea was, okay, we have this ambition. We're gonna get it. He's gonna become king. He's queen, and yes, and then everything's gonna be great. Right? That's what the ambition infers. Okay, now that they've achieved that, there's a lack of satisfaction. Now with Lady Macbeth, we're seeing hints of this, but we don't see it fully manifest yet. But it's certainly there. But with Macbeth, we are seeing these changes. We're seeing that while he's acknowledging and complaining to some degree about his dreams and this sense of what is conceivably guilt, perhaps, or anxiety in any case, but Macbeth's means by which to deal with this lies in his political machinations. How do I maintain my status here? Okay, I got it. My ambition was to become king. Got it. Okay, no time to rest. Now I've got to be able to consolidate this power base. I have to be able to maintain my status as king. And I see threats everywhere. And of course, that kind of thinking of seeing threats and not being able to trust anyone, right? Remember, Banquo was like his closest friend, his comrade is in arms, his brother in arms. But now his thinking is so polluted by the acts that he's taken in this pursuit of ambition, coupled with his exposure to the weird sisters and their prophecies. He can't trust Banquo. He can't trust anyone. And of course, a lot of that is a self-reflection, if you will, insofar as he's looking at it. I'm capable of turning on King Duncan, who was really good to me. Therefore, I wouldn't trust myself, so I can't trust anyone else. Okay, it's almost a self-fulfilling type of distrust. Since I'm untrustworthy, I have to assume everyone else is untrustworthy. Okay, and we see how this has been growing in him. But we also see this other aspect of his change insofar as he's more decisive and more acts more quickly. We see this with when he has Banquo murdered. It's an evolutionary process coupled with these elements of what seems to be not necessarily guilt. It really is much more, I would say, anxiety. There's no peace here. And then we see him really melt down at the banquet, right? And at that stage, because he's seen the ghost of Banquo, which no one else sees, Lady Macbeth is still trying to keep him steady, but without much success at that point. And it's a pivotal moment because when we were looking at Act 3, that display at the banquet now starts getting more and more of the nobles, the Scottish nobles, scratching their heads. Something is amiss here, right? They try to, oh, he's like this sometimes. There's even a suggestion, he's partying too hard at the banquet. Lady Macbeth saying, don't worry about him. And Macbeth himself says, everyone, when the ghost disappears from his vision, I get like this sometimes. Nothing for you to be concerned about. Then the ghost comes back and he loses it again, and Lady Macbeth has to tell everyone to leave. And this has, as we saw in that final scene in Act 3, this now has people suspicious and recognizing that something is wrong in Scotland with Macbeth being the king, right? And then there's also that reference to Macduff, who we saw earlier, who was suspicious even earlier about Macbeth. He wouldn't go to Macbeth's coronation. We know that King Duncan's sons, one, Malcolm is in England, Donalbain is in Ireland, and now things are starting to come to a different perspective insofar as everyone seems to be recognizing what is wrong, or that there's something wrong with Macbeth. And now they need to do something about it. They need to do something about it, not even so much because of their suspicion, because there's no overt suspicion, and it's hard to prove that he committed regicide, he killed the king, but for the sake of Scotland itself, right? The state of affairs in the state need to be put back in order. And Macbeth is not ruling as the king, he's in charge. And since he is corrupt, and now everyone's recognizing there's something wrong with him, he must be removed, because if the king is not steady, then the country is not steady. And it's an important theme to remember, this idea of the individual versus the state, the society, the role of the individual in that society. Where are the loyalties, right? Is it just political maneuvering, and I'm just going to latch on to whoever's going to, do better by me as an individual? Or is it about doing what's best for the state? Okay? And that becomes a key theme in Act 4. All right, so again, we're looking at Macbeth's transformation, the changes that are going on in Macbeth, his descent, further descent into madness, becomes evil. We're going to see that here. It really manifests. Remember, his killing of Banquo, there is a logical, politically logical reason for it, right? Because Banquo is Banquo's children are going to be the next kings, and that is a threat, a political threat, and an existential threat to a large extent for Macbeth. So there's a rationale, evil and bad as it may be, there's still a rationale for it. It was the same rationale when he was really struggling with a decision as to, should he kill King Duncan, or should he let the prophecy just happen on its own? And that's where Lady Macbeth said, no, 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 we got to do this. What kind of a man are you? That whole speech that we covered. And again, reminder that we're seeing how Macbeth is becoming a little bit more like Lady Macbeth in that scene, when he is coaxing and manipulating to a large extent the murderers to go and kill Banquo and his son. And of course, they fail. They kill Banquo, but they don't kill his son. All right, so that, I mean, that's where we're at. And oops, wrong one. There we go. Hold on, sorry. Let's get this up. There we are. Okay. So we start remember at the end of Act 3, after this big disaster at the banquet for Macbeth, he is now determined to seek out the weird sisters, the three witches, and get some answers. Things aren't going the way he wants them to go. And this is, again, an example of his character shift. He's becoming, remember, it was just by chance, well, not so much chance, certainly on his part. I mean, it was the witches that were seeking out Macbeth. Now Macbeth is going to seek out the witches. And of course, Macbeth has changed in all the ways that we discussed, and including the fact that he is now king. Okay. So, don't know why this, let me try this one more time, because that's annoying with that space there, and I don't know how to fix it. So if we stop this share one more time, it's a new update for the Zoom, so things are a little different, and I hope it's not going to be a problem. Just give me a sec to try to fix this. And there we go. That should do it. I hope. Okay. Sharing Beth. Okay. There we are. All right. So we start the Act 4 with the witches, right? And we know that Macbeth is seeking them out to get some answers. We spent a fair amount of time with the witches. We're really going to see them in all their, if I dare, their glory here. They're in a cavern in the middle with a boiling cauldron. They're putting together some kind of potion of sorts. And interesting to note what they're putting in there. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but it is really, it's all elements of nature, but a kind of debased nature. And of course, bordering on the supernatural, because we know that the witches are representative of a supernatural element within this society, a very negative one. All right. So we're seeing them here. Of course, the famous refrain: double toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Double toil and trouble, fire burn, cauldron double. And while they're doing this, they're putting in the fillet of a fenny snake, wool of bat and tongue of dog. I mean, it's quite a concoction here that they're putting together. And while they're chanting, seemingly putting a spell on it, or invocating some kind of a spell. Hecate, who we met before, is kind of something akin to their leader, and they're all involved. Again, baboon's blood. It's quite the stew. They're dancing and song. Okay, so this ritualistic element to it as well, which is counterbalanced to some degree, because there are some religious connotations here, right, in the play, Christian religions, and this would really be an antithesis to that. All right, so we have this ritualistic element, you know, same kind of rituals that are often part of religious ceremonies. Theirs is a dark ceremony, black spirits, etc. Okay, and in comes Macbeth. So, you know, noticeable with Macbeth's arrival, you know, how now, you secret black and midnight hags, what is it you do? Note the tone, note the authority. Yes, he's king now, but we've been seeing this evolve in him, where he's taking more charge. He didn't go there with Lady Macbeth. He's there on his own. It's his decision, and he's now coming with attitude. You know, what is it you do? A deed without a name. And he says, I conjure you by that which you profess, however you come to know it. Answer me. Though you untie the winds and let them fight against the churches, he acknowledges it. I know you are antithetical to the church. I know you're bad. I know you're evil. Okay, I'm no longer debating that. I'm no longer wondering, maybe I shouldn't do this because they're not good and all this stuff. I know who you are. I accept that you are against the churches. You are antithetical to the religious beliefs of our land. I don't care. All right, I've started down this path. Yes, I've become king. I'm not satisfied. I need answers from you. I need to know what's going to happen. You will answer me and do as I bid. All right. So he's really taking on this much more forceful attitude, right? We see it again here, to even till destruction. Say, answer me to what I ask you. And the witches, you know, who we get the sense, you know, they've been anticipating this. They set this whole thing in motion, going back to the first act, where, you know, and remember when they first told him and how he got excited, oh, I'm going to be king? Oh, come on, that's not possible. You know, he doesn't believe it. But it satisfies this latent ambition in him. But they also told him back then, well, they told Banquo, but, you know, Banquo, your kids are going to be kings. That was something that not so much slipped by Macbeth, but he was just so caught up in the concept and the possibility that his ambitions could be satisfied, that he really didn't take much time to think about that. And we're going to see something similar here. When he says, you know, answer me to what I ask you, the first one is speak. Second one is demand. Will answer. Sure. Ask away. Say, if thou'd rather hear it from our mouths, or you can hear it from our masters. I mean, it won't even be us. Check out what we've got in store for you, King Macbeth. And of course, that's what they've been brewing in that cauldron. Call him, let me see him, Macbeth says. Okay, masters. First witch, poured sow's blood and hath eaten her 9 farrow, grease that sweat from the murderer's gibbet, throw into the flame. They're adding some final ingredients. They call out thunder, which of course we know is associated with the witches, and thunder and storm is disruption. Okay, it has the negative connotations it has to it. And the first apparition appears, and it is an armed head, just a head, okay, head with armor on it. And Macbeth, tell me thou unknown power, because it is unknown. Thing to keep in mind here with these, with the witches now, and what, especially in this, because this we built up towards this scene with the witches. They really are. They're hard to define. There's something obviously unworldly about these witches. Some kind of power that goes beyond earthly power. Right, that's the supernatural element to it, but we really see it in its full manifestation here Um, they they are ultimately portrayed as something that would be incomprehensible to a human thoughts, right? And we see this expressed um, here, right? Um, Thou unknown power, and Macbeth is fine with this at this point. He doesn't care. I know you're unworldly. I know you're evil. I know you're against the church. I have no idea what you are. You're unknown, right? You're unknown to the human psyche. You're unknown to the human capacity of thought. But tell me anyways. And the first witch says, he knows thy thought, the apparition. Hear his speech, but say thou not. Don't talk to it. He knows, the apparition knows what you're thinking. Just listen, Macbeth. Chill and listen. The first apparition. Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. Beware Macduff. Okay, now Macduff is going to be taking on a much larger role in these next two acts. Okay, what we know about Macduff up to now is he didn't go to Macbeth's coronation. Macbeth is a bit suspicious, so this is confirming his suspicion. First apparition, the armored head says, beware Macduff, and then descends. And whatever thou art, for thy good caution thanks. Right? Macbeth now is thanking the apparition, thanking this unworldly, unearthly, unhuman, evil apparition. And thou hast harped my fear aright. You've confirmed my fears. But one word more. I want to ask you something else. And the first one, he will not be commanded. But here's another one, more potent than the first. So keep in mind, we see these three, right? Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. This is, and it coordinates with the three apparitions that he's going to see. This was the first one, beware Macduff. The second one, the second apparition, is a bloody child. Okay, these are significant. These are riddles that are coming next. All right, and they're almost there to kind of whet our appetite to figure out how these riddles are going to be resolved. Because when we see what happens here, it's a bloody child, comes up, does the three Macbeths, okay? And Macbeth is almost flippant here. Had I 3 ears, I'd hear thee. It's like, get on with it. Why are you calling out my name 3 times? Let's hear what you have to say. And very interestingly, the bloody child says, be bloody, bold, and resolute. Okay? Be bloody, be prepared to kill, be bold, take action, and be determined, resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man. Okay? Laugh at whatever power man, earthly man, has. For none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. None of woman born. Everyone's born from a woman. This apparition is telling that no person born from a woman can harm you. And then descent. And of course, what's the suggestion there is you can't be harmed. Right? And Macbeth's response, because it's fairly obvious, then live, Macduff, what need I fear of thee? Right? So the first one says, beware Macduff. Okay, I better watch out for Macduff. The second one says, no one, none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Well, then what do I have to, there's nothing for me to fear with Macduff, right? Because he can't hurt me. But, without hesitation, but I'll make assurance double sure. Okay? And take a bond of fate. Thou shalt not live. I have nothing to fear from you, Macduff, because you're born from a woman, presumably, so you can't hurt me. But you know what? I'm taking no chances. It's going back to the reason, to kill King Duncan. All right, if it's a prophecy, it's going to happen. He will become king, but he's going to use his will and his actions to make it happen, as opposed to waiting for fate or the fates to make it happen. Same thing here. I have nothing to fear from you because you can't hurt me, but I'm going to kill you anyways. Third apparition comes. It's a child crowned with a tree in his hand. Okay? What is this that rises like the issue of a king? Okay? It looks like a king. Wears upon his baby brother round the top of sovereignty. Wears a crown. Right? We know that because of this. Listen, but speak not to it, they all the witches tell him again. And the third apparition tells him, be lion mettled, proud, and take no care who chafes, who frets, or where conspirators are. Basically, don't worry about anything. Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Burnham wood to high Dunsinane hill shall come against him. Basically, what the third apparition, this child crowned with a tree in his hand, is saying, Macbeth, you can never be beaten. You can never be vanquished until great Burnham Wood, which is a forest, moves. Until a forest physically moves to another location. Dunsinane Hill. Right? Only then, only if a forest physically moves there, can you possibly be vanquished. And Macbeth then descends, and Macbeth says, well, that will never be. Who can impress the forest, bid the tree unfix his earth-bound root? This goes on to say, this can't happen. So you got these two here that are basically telling Macbeth, no person can hurt you, and you can't lose unless this impossible, seemingly impossible thing happens. And no person can harm you unless they somehow impossibly were not born of woman. Seemingly good news. Which is tell him at this point, and very tellingly, of course, they may just be goading him because they know he's crossed a threshold. Seek to know no more. And it's good advice. Hey, Macbeth, you don't need to know anything more. I mean, what more would you need to know? You're safe. You're cool. You've got this. And Macbeth, though now in his evolving state of mind, I will be satisfied. Deny me this, and an eternal curse fall upon you. He's threatening the witches. Not sure how he'd be able to back that threat up. Deny me this, and an eternal curse fall on you. Let me know why. Sinks the cauldron. What noise is that? Right. So we know that the cauldron now is disappearing. And then the witches one at a time show, all together, show his eyes and grieve his heart. Okay, so now we told you, don't ask, you don't want to see anything more. He insists, threatens them. All right, we'll show you. This is going to upset you. All right. In comes a show of 8 kings. The last with a glass in his hand, ghost of Banquo following. Okay, so what do we have here? 8 kings. line of kings, one after the other. Ghost of Banquo following. And Macbeth is looking at them, and what is his comments are going to tell us what he's seen. What do they look like? What does this mean? Thou art too like the spirit of Banquo. Down, the crown does sear mine eyeballs, and thy hair, thou other gold-bound brow, is like the first. A third is like the former. They all look the same. They look the same because they are all Banquo's descendants. Son, grandson, all the way down through 8 of them. They all look like Banquo. Right? That's the prophecy that was told to Banquo and Macbeth, since he was there, that the descendants of Banquo would be king. But of course, how does that reconcile with the idea that Macbeth can never be vanquished and no person born of a woman can harm him? It's a bit of a conundrum. For the blood-boltered Banquo smiles upon me and points at them for his. Like, remember now, this is after he's gone through the scene Banquo's ghost. The apparitions vanish. What? Is this so? Are you telling me that Banquo's still going to have his line become kings? All right, and aye, sir, all this is so. But why stands Macbeth thus amazedly? You know, why are you surprised? We told you this the first time we met. What's the problem? Okay. The music of the witches dance, and then they vanish. Right. We already talked a bit about Hecate in relation to the witches. And Macbeth, where are they gone? Let this pernicious hour stand I cursed in the calendar. Come in without there because Lennox comes in. What's your grace? Saw you the weird sisters? No, I didn't see anything. Now, again, we remember how many things, remember the dagger that Macbeth sees, seems to be a bit of a hallucination. When we talked about Banquo's ghost, remember no one else can see the ghost? There is a suggestion there that it may be just in Macbeth's head, right? So he doesn't know what he's seeing, if it's actually there or not. Somewhat suggested in there. And then here, did you see them, the weird sisters? No, I didn't see anything. What are you talking about? Okay. Came they not by you? No, indeed, my lord. Infected by the air whereon they ride, and damned all those that trust them. Really interesting line, right? Because infected be the air whereon they ride. They infect the air wherever they are, and damned all those that trust them. But of course, Macbeth trusts them. He was skeptical for a while, but then once the things that they prophesied came true, he's believing them. That's why he seeks them out, because he wants to know what's going to happen, and he trusts what they tell him. And he's saying, anyone who trusts them should be damned. In a sense, basically saying that he should be damned. Lennox, why is he there? Macduff, right, is fled to England. Why England? Well, who's in England? Malcolm's in England, one of the kings that Macbeth murdered, one of his sons, the rightful heir to the throne, presumably, since, remember, we saw in the first act that the king says, Malcolm, you are going to be my heir. And the only reason it didn't happen that way is because Malcolm, out of fear that whoever killed his father was going to kill him, ran. And that's where the suspicion was laid on him and his brother. Macduff is fled to England. Now Macbeth has this moment. Okay? Time thou anticipest my dread exploits. Time. Remember, he's often not acting, taking up time because he's weighing things, he's thinking about things. The flighty purpose never is overtook unless the deed go with it. Right? You have action. You have to have actions, not just words. And then he makes this famous little statement. From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. Very important. It is now, we've been seeing him slowly progress towards this moment from this waffling back and forth, needing Lady Macbeth to humiliate him and shame him into taking action, to now he vows from this moment, as soon as I think of something, as soon as I feel something in my heart, I will take action. I'm not going to even think about it. It's all going to be action, and it'll be whatever it will be. And he says here, the castle of Macduff, I will surprise. He knows Macduff's in England, but he'll go to Macduff's castle. Seize upon Fife, remember, that's his title. Give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. No boasting like a fool. I'm not going to talk about it. This deed I'll do before this purpose cool. I'm going to act now before I have a chance to think about it and maybe change my mind. So immediate action. No more thinking and contemplating. No need for Lady Macbeth to egg him on, challenge his manhood. Come on, what are you doing? He's got it all now. We've seen how he's evolved to this point. And then coinciding with that, every act of violence, there is at least a semblance of rationale as to why to do it. And there certainly would be a rationale for him to want to kill Macduff, since the apparition, the first apparition, said, beware Macduff. But Macduff's not at his castle. Macduff is in England. He says, I'm not taking his castle. I'm not seizing the castle to get Macduff. I'm seizing this castle because I'm going to wipe out his family, his servants, kill the dogs, everything. If he was walking an edge, if he was close to the edge, he's leaped over the edge. This is pure evil. Pure evil. And he's not even thinking about it. The suggestion there is if he had time to think about it and mull it over as he had done in the past, he wouldn't do it, but he's no longer the same person. He's gone. And now he's going to order this just horrific act. All right, so here's Macduff's castle. Well, we know this is where, he's sending people. And again, this is very important in terms of getting an idea of Macduff, even though this is about Lady Macduff and her son. Note here what she's contemplating. This gets into the area of loyalty to the state as being what is most important versus loyalty to the self, the individual, loyalty to the immediate family. What takes precedent? The state, the country of Scotland, or the individual family. And Lady Macbeth starts it, right? It's Lady Macbeth, her son, and Ross, right? We know who Ross is. He's been around. He's one of the noblemen. Lady Macbeth, what had he done to make him fly the land? Like, why did my husband leave? And Ross is saying, you must have patience, madam. Right? Because Ross understands that Macduff left to go to England to try to, see what Malcolm's doing and see if there's a way to get rid of Macbeth and restore Scotland, right, to its where they consider to be its rightful place, and not in this unnatural state it's in as a result of Macbeth's behavior. And he's saying, you must have patience, madam. He had none. His flight was madness. When our actions do not, our fears do make us traitors. And this brings up this important theme, right? The idea of who is a traitor. It's very political in many respects. Our fears do make us traitors. And again, Ross says, you know not whether it was his wisdom or his fear. You don't know why he left. Okay? Ross has a pretty good idea. But Lady Macbeth doesn't. That's, where's my husband? Wisdom to leave his wife, to leave his babes, his mansion and his titles in a place from whence himself does fly. He loves us not. Okay? All is fear and nothing is the love. Right? She's just incensed. How could he leave us? Right? We should be his priority. That's what she's suggesting. And you'll see it'll come back up in the next scene. Ross, again, my dearest cuz, I pray you school yourself. But for your husband, he is noble, wise, judicious, and best knows the fits of the season. He knows what's best. You have to trust him. And he's going, I dare not speak much further. He's getting frustrated. But cruel are the times when we are traitors and do not know ourselves. Okay. Things at the worst will cease or else caught. And this is important here coming from Ross. And do not know ourselves when we hold rumor from what we fear, yet know not what we fear, but float upon a wild and violent sea. Ross is articulating the reality that things are so unnatural, topsy-turvy, right? It's like they're floating on a wild sea because of what Macbeth has done. Again, showing that the relationship between the state, the country of Scotland, and nature, that it is as if nature is disrupted. That means Scotland is disrupted. We see that as well with the apparitions and the witches and the supernatural events. Remember back in the first act where there was, the discussion about how, and relating it to other events in the past, where if there is something unsavory, something wrong with who is ruling, then that impacts everything in the state and in the land and in the country. Things that at the worst will cease, float upon violent sea, each way and move. I take my leave of you. Shall not be long, but I'll be here again. Things at the worst will cease, or else climb upward to what they were before. Right? You say, be patient. Okay, we have to do something here, and when we do, things will certainly won't get worse and should get better. Ross leaves, and Lady Macbeth, now because she's so angry, starts this conversation with her son. And she says to her son, Sirrah, your father is dead, and what will you do now? How will you live? And it starts this bird, again, the nature metaphors, right? As birds do, mother, what? With worms and flies, right? Because birds eat worms and flies. So the mother, it's a fascinating exchange here. With what I get, I mean, as so do they. Okay, we are all part of nature. We will all manage one way or the other. And of course, Lady Macbeth, poor bird, thou'st never fear the net nor lime, the pitfalls nor the gin. Oh, basically saying, that's very naive of you. And the son, retorts it, why should I, mother? Poor birds, they are not set for. My father is not dead, for all you're saying. Of course, he's not. She's saying basically what he's did. He might as well be dead. He's dead to us. She's very upset, obviously. Yes, he is dead. How wilt thou do for a father? And the son says, nay, how will you do for a husband? Right? So there's this banter between the two. It's done for a certain amount of theatrical effect because we know what's about to happen here. And it shows this banter between the mother and the son. It shows the son to be quite witty, intelligent, and it's just going to make what's happening that much more painful for the audience as we witness it. And how will you for a husband? She says, well, I can buy me 20 in any market. Husbands are a dime a dozen. Fathers aren't. Then you'll buy them to sell again. And the mother acknowledges, thou speakest with all thy wit, and yet in faith with wit enough for thee. And the son asks, and this comes back to this traitor. Was my father a traitor, mother? And Lady Macbeth says, yes, that he was. The son is like, what is a traitor? And the mother responds, why, one that swears and lies. Okay, so it's a very high bar moralistic answer. And be all traitors that do so? Anyone who swears and lies is a traitor? Everyone that does so is a traitor and must be hanged. Anyone who swears and lies is a traitor, and all traitors must be hanged. And must they all be hanged that swear and lie? The son said, really? Everyone. And then the son goes, well, who must hang them? Who's going to hang these traitors? Why, the honest men will. And then the son says, then the liars and the swearers are fools. For there are liars and swearers enow to beat the honest men that hang them. So the son is being analytic here. He's working. He's being logical. So anyone who swears and lies is a traitor, and it should be hanged. And the ones who are going to hang them are the honest men. Well, then the liars and the swearers are fools, because he says there are more liars and swearers, there's more traitors than there are honest men. So why don't they just hang the honest men instead? And now God help the poor monkey. But and it goes on, hold on here. But what will you do for a father? She comes back, but your father is dead. And he goes, no, if he were dead, you'd weep for him. If you would not, it were a good sign that I should quickly have a new father. And they went, well, poor Pratt, how thou talkest. So again, this exchange does a couple of things, right? It sets us up in terms of feeling more shocked and horrified at what's about to transpire. But it also brings up this idea of traitor. And, what constitutes traitor? Because the irony, of course, is she's accusing Macduff of being a traitor, when in fact Macduff is trying to save Scotland, which we clearly see in the next scene. After write this, enter a messenger. Messenger comes in, some danger does approach you nearly. These are Macbeth's people are coming, and we know what they're coming to do. And the messenger comes in to warn them and says, you better get out of here. And Lady Macduff says, whither should I fly? I have done no harm. They're after my husband. Why are they after me? And then she goes, but I remember now, I am in this earthly world, where to do harm is often laudable, to do good sometime accounted dangerous folly. Why then, alas, do I put up that womanly defense to say I have done no harm? she's starting to realize it may not matter, right? And this again speaks to what was going on here. Well, why don't the swearers and the fools just take charge, right? The honest people wouldn't stand a chance because there's more of the swearers and the fools. There's more traitors. So when she's saying, okay, they're coming here to kill me or to do harm to me, why would they? I've done no one any harm. We haven't done any, no one's going to come here to hurt us. We haven't done anything wrong. But then again, how this connects with what was said here. But will that work? Right? In this case, she's the honest one. And coming are the swearers and the liars, so to speak, metaphorically. Right? The bad guys versus the good guys. And geez, her son just brought up an interesting point. Why don't the bad guys just, there's more of them. Why don't they just turn on the good guys? Of course, that's what happened to her. They come, they say they're looking for a husband. The first murderer says he's a traitor. The son is defending his father. Thou liest, that shag-haired villain. And the first murderer says, oh, what, you ate? And kills him. The son, as he's dying, it's a dramatic death, but it's meant to be a dramatic death. Even today, you don't see many movies or plays where children die. It's heady stuff. So this is a dramatic death, and he says, as he's been stabbed, he turns to his mother, he has killed me, mother. Run away, I pray you. Save yourself. And he dies. And Lady Macbeth, crying murder, runs away with the murderers following her. Now, indeed, it doesn't say that they caught Lady Macbeth and killed her. So at this moment, we can hope that she gets away, but these are professional murderers, soldiers would be. They're sent by Macbeth. It'd be pretty miraculous if she got away from this. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I'm going to make a separate video for scene 3 because I don't want these videos to go too long. Okay, and this is, and I spent more time with these first 2 scenes than I anticipated, but they are important. But we did cover them in class. But I will do a separate one, probably obviously fairly short, and post it fairly soon on scene 3. You should obviously get into Act 5, all right? Be attentive if you haven't read this 3rd scene between Malcolm and Macduff, and if you weren't in the class when we talked about it at length, and you're going to read it before I post the next video, keep in mind when you engage in this scene that this concept of traitors is key, because Malcolm is going to be testing all through the first part of this. Malcolm is testing Macduff to see if he is going to be loyal to Scotland, particularly Scotland, right? Not just trying to play a political game and go with whoever is going to be in power, but what is best for Scotland. And keep in mind how that ties in very much to him leaving his family, maybe not fully realizing or thinking that it's possible that he'd be leaving his family in such a risky situation, because the barbarity of what Macbeth ordered was to a large extent inconceivable, because it goes beyond what would be thought as humanly possible in terms of how evil it is, how unworldly it is, how unnatural in terms of human nature it is. But of course, we know that Macbeth has crossed that line. And we know that the moment he crossed it was right after the apparitions, right after that extraordinarily gruesome potion that the witches were brewing in that cauldron. All unnatural things. All right, so it's interesting how Macduff responds, because it's brought up in this scene as well. Why did you leave your family? And his reason for leaving family, as Ross was hinting at when he was initially talking to Lady Macduff, be patient. Your husband, Macduff, it's not an important mission here. There are bigger things, not bigger than the slaughter of the family, but no one is really conceiving that it's possible that Macbeth would go that far. Okay? But it is brought up, and it's to highlight and emphasize this conflict, if you will, between individual responsibility and responsibility to the state. Loyalty versus treachery. So if you're reading this scene 3 for the first time, be attentive to recognizing that Malcolm, when he says what a terrible king he would be, he's lying to test Macduff. All right. So what I'll probably do in the next video is come back to scene 3, go over it, and then segue into the next act. We'll see how that goes. But at the same time, you should be prepared to get through scene 3 on your own. I mean, that's the whole idea. We've been doing a lot of these. If you're watching the videos, you're learning what to look for and how to read it. So probably what I'll do, this is the final scene of Act 4, is I'll review it as a preamble to when I start getting into Act 5. So keep your eyes open for these videos that will be coming, and there'll be a few, because remember, we do not have class next Monday. All right, so there'll be videos covering all the rest of the play, at least 2 more, if not 3, before we meet again in class. But really, try to read these scenes and these acts before you watch these videos. Okay, and then you can read along with it as I go through it. All right, it gives you a double shot of it. Okay. As always, if you have questions or concerns, contact me, and we can always set up one-on-one Zoom meetings, and try to, again, keep up with the reading, because when we come back, you will be getting your final exam question. You'll have 2 weeks to write it. It'll obviously be on Macbeth. So the next time we meet, it is really to your advantage to come with all your questions and concerns. Okay, but please do the reading and watch the videos, because a lot of your questions and concerns might be answered by the video. I'm saying that only because we have this long gap before our last class. All right, everyone, be safe, and we will see you soon.